Got it. Got it. Yay.
This meeting is being live streamed.
It is. Thank you, Simon Hodgson. Just ruined it there. Good evening, everyone. My name is Simon Misiewicz from the Property Expert panel. You've just heard Simon Hodgson, who I'm sure you'll hear plenty from later on before we muzzle him. Good evening, everyone. Thank you ever so much for coming on board to this tonight's Property Expert panel meeting, where we answer your property-related questions about investments, hoping to secure your success in 2022. We've all dressed up for you on this fine occasion for our next kind of photo shoot, which Bronwen has done an amazing job on. So what I will do is I will let the panel members talk about what they've got to share with you tonight. But before I do that, I've got to share the presentation for tonight. So I'm going to just share my screen, which will enable us to introduce ourselves. So just bear with me a sec while I do that. Whilst I'm talking, of course, if you do have any questions, make sure you type those into the question box as soon as you humanly possibly can. And indeed, just say hello and hi on the chat box as well. And I'll do my best to come and say hello on there as well. So without further ado, make sure that you get your Property Expert panel checklist, which you can download. The description box of this video will contain a link for you to download. It is very, very useful. It will help you to understand what property strategy you should be looking at, what type of properties you should be investing into, what you should do before, during, and after you have got that property as well. So do download that and make sure that you make good use of it. As it says on here, I am Simon Misiewicz from Optimised Accountants. I'm a property expat tax advisor. So if you're investing in not just the UK, but other countries as well, then I can help you with your tax strategy needs. A couple of things that I want to just share with you before I move on to the other panel members is the 31st of January 2022 is normally the deadline for self-assessment tax returns. Has anything changed? Well, actually, you can now submit your tax return by the 28th of February 2022, and there will not be any penalties whatsoever. So if you are going to be delayed for any reason, fear not, you are not going to get a £100 fine. But the small print is that HMRC will charge you interest because you are late paying the tax on the 31st of January. So you are going to save £100, but you will incur interest for the late payment of tax. The big change for me in 2022 is the tax nomad journey. Yes, that's right, tax nomad journey. I've put some narrative in there just so you can understand what it is, but the tax nomad journey is something where I've been planning on for a number of years, but I'm going to make it happen this year. I'm going to share with you how I take 6 figures out of my business and take zero tax on that withdrawal. So stay tuned to this video channel as Louise and I will describe how we go on our tax nomad journey. So stay tuned for that in due course. But we have the lovely, wonderful looking and beautifully dressed Teresa. So Teresa, come on board and give us tonight's update.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Simon. Yes, hi everyone, I'm Teresa Kaczmarek. I'm here representing the National Residential Landlord Association. I am a landlord myself. I have been for, I think, probably about 8 years now. And I've been a member of the Landlord Association as well for just as long as well. It's just like a one-stop shop for, you know, everything you need to start a tenancy, maintain a tenancy and end a tenancy, really. So couldn't do without it. So yes, if anybody's got any questions tonight, anything to do with landlording, then please do pop them in the chat box there. I haven't got really that much to say on this slide, Simon, and I think that's good news. So we've started the year with not very much news for landlords, which I think is good. I think we need a bit of a break. So all I was going to highlight today was that the NRLA have got a bit of a sale on with the training courses. I'd always recommend that for anybody taking on tenants that they do the landlord fundamentals course, because that'll just give you the basis of what you should know to start being a landlord. And that's basis 20% off, so you can, without even being a member, you can take that course for £51.20. So yeah, knock yourself out with that. So that's available to the end of January. And if you haven't joined the NRLA, then there is a discount code there, I123, to give you £15 off. But yes, I shall just hand back to Simon, and shall I wait the questions?
Yes, well, over to Paul.Hilliard. So Paul, if you want to come on board.
I do want to come on board. Welcome everyone, Happy New Year. And let's hope it's going to be a fantastic one for all of us, especially those in the property investing arena. My name is Paul.Hilliard. I'm the operations director for a company called LNPG. That's the full name there, Landlords National Purchasing Group. And what we are is a group of landlords who have formed together to maximise the purchases that we all need, such as bathrooms, boilers, kitchens, tiles, furniture, everything you need for a refurb. And what we've done is we've gone directly to the manufacturer and obtained volume rebates. So it's not discounts, it's rebates. So if you're in the refurb market, then by all means, get in touch with me. There's my details there, paul.hilliard@lnpg.co.uk, and do feel free to give me a call. Before I go on to this month's special offers from LNPG, I'll just remind everyone that I'm also a landlord. I'm a property investor, and my portfolio covers, I suppose, every area of the property investing business. So I've got commercial to residential, I've got HMOs, I've got buy-to-lets, I've got service accommodation, I've even got a rent-to-rent. So there we go. And also are in the social housing arena, but just be careful on that, as certainly the Birmingham area is shrinking rapidly due to the activity of the council to reduce its exposure to it. So let's get on to the special offers. This month on Johnson's Paints, we've got acrylic durable matte 5 litres at £22.54 plus VAT. If you like cover plus white paint, just for the ceilings predominantly, we recommend, then that's only £11.82 for 5 litres. Mixed colours are £17.75 for the 5 litres from Cover Plus and £24.90 for acrylic durable matte. We've also got acrylic durable eggshell, which is perfect for your kitchens and bathrooms. 5 litres are £23.05 and mixed colours are £29.99. From Maudsley, who are the bathroom and heating supplier, they've got a special 61% off all their John Guest BeFit underfloor heating. So if that's what you're planning on doing, what a great time to take the opportunity to save further money. Carpet and Flooring, who are the carpet supplier, they're doing a special buy 20 square metres or more on Vario 8mm laminate, and they'll provide you for free underlay. CTD, which is the specialist tiling distributor, who are usually based in or near Hodgson. They're doing Bliss Cream and Cream Concept wall tiles at £16 per square metre, a lovely oblong tile, and matching floor tiles are only £17 per square metre. Almost there, we've got Fullbrook Nursery, who are a landscaping and nursery supplier, and they're giving you 25% off hedging bushes for which is from £75 for 100 bare root bushes. So excellent opportunity if you're thinking about developing a plot of land and you want to screen it, then great time to do that. And finally, Electric Radiators Direct are offering up to 20% off their designer radiators. So that's all on top of what our special deals are throughout the year. So that's been done for this evening. Good night and see you next month.
Well done.
Thank you, Paul. Tim.Bishop here. I own Bell&Bishop. We're solicitors who, as you'll see, we really understand property investors. That's because I've got 22 in my property team. I've got a new property litigator, and we have specialists also. We've got probably the largest leasehold lease extension team in the country. We always provide free initial phone advice to property investors, so don't sit there worrying if you've got a problem. Get in contact with us, and there are contact details. I'm also an investor and developer myself with experience of commercial reversion, HMO and serviced accommodation. But apart from that, I know we have lots of questions, so I'm not going to say any more. Words my family have been waiting to hear for years. I'm going to shut up. Over to the next.
Over to me then. Okay, so hi guys, I'm Ross Maynard. For my sins, I've been in construction all my working life, which is in excess of 30 years. I'm not telling you anymore. I'm an investor, I'm a landlord, and obviously I'm a developer as well. The day job, I run a maintenance refurbishment company, which is exclusively for landlords and work in the rental sector. I also teach investors how to balance risk and opportunity when they're looking at building projects, and a bit more on that shortly. Can we just flip onto the slide, Simon?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
You haven't done them. Okay, don't worry.
Sorry for that.
That's all right. I was a bit late getting to you. Each month, I like to go through the things that I've seen in the day job and just bring out any issues that that I think we need to highlight. So this month, 3 things I've got for you. We've had I've been to 3 clients this month who had a property downvalued due to building issues by the surveyors. Most of them are relatively minor, but some are potential structural issues. They always appear in cracks over windows, in walls, etc. 2 out of 3 were simply cracks, and the surveyor was being over enthusiastic, let's say. But there has been one that was a structural issue, and fair play for him for finding it. Word to the wise, the surveyor will always pick up on cracks. If you're selling a property, make sure they're repaired and repaired properly. If you're not selling one but you're viewing one, then make sure you know what's causing that issue and be prepared to negotiate on that, because it's a great opportunity. I mentioned last month the Jill and John story, which is one of my favourites. I get lots of these as a sort of refurbishment guy. Normally, Jill and John, they're a couple, got some money to invest in a property. They've never done it before, so they get hold of a builder. They discuss what's needed, and he gets on with it. And it's all wonderful for about 2/3 of the way through the project, and then it's a disaster. Problems come, problems cost money. It ends up costing more time and taking more money. There's no such thing in this world, in my opinion, as a bad project. There's only bad programs and bad budgets and people not knowing. So again, allow my simple rule, and I think most of the guys here would agree, 20% contingency on both time and money. People do it on time, on money, but they never do it on time. And look, there's no harm if it's done quicker, is it? If we get a project finished quicker, we get rental income quicker, and the builder's happy because he gets on to the next job quicker, and they're very busy. Last bit from me, and then I'll follow Tim's lead. Why do buyers rush viewings? I've seen buyers go around looking at property, and I've been to a few with people, and they whip round in 10, 15 minutes. And then they go and make a massive financial decision based on those 10 or 15 minutes. So when you go to view a property, tell the agent you want an hour and take an hour. And I do everything. I run taps and flush toilets and look down the drains and look in the loft, because they're the issues that will catch you out. It may seem a bit strange to some, but do it. Part of what I'm trying to achieve at the moment is I've developed an inspection checklist. It walks you through what you should be looking for. It's software based. It's almost there. And I need some test pilots, 3 or 4 people to try it out for me. I'll give you free access to it for a month. If you're viewing lots of properties at the moment, take it, use it. Tell me what it needs, what it doesn't need. The feedback would be really appreciated.
Ross, can we do something with the views now? So
yeah, you got the wrong email address up there, Simon.
Well, what I was going to say, let's protect people's email addresses, including yours as well, for that matter.
Okay.
I would say, is there a website that people can go to?
Yeah, simple, ross-maynard.com. Hit the contact us, and that will take you to me.
All right, so the first three people that do that now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Free access, yes?
I'm watching the emails.
Perfect, there you go.
All right, that's me.
Marvellous. Over to Simon Hodgson.
Right, okay. Love oblong tile, Paul. It's great to hear about the prices of oblong tiles. Superb. Right, guys, this is me. Yeah, I am funded. So effectively a specialist buy-to-let broker covering these particular areas: buy-to-let, bridging and refurbishment, development loans, commercial, semi-commercial, particularly helping clients recycle the cash to go on to the next deal, finding ways of structuring things that are investor friendly. A lot of brokers, in fact, most brokers don't really understand investors. That's why you potentially could be useful if you contact or connect with me. If we could have a next slide, Simon, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I know we talk so much. Simon wasn't even ready for me to ask for the next slide. Did you see that? Amazing. So just so I'd give a little bit of feedback as I've seen it over the last sort of 4 weeks. Now, I know that straddled Christmas. However, there's still been lots going on. So Shawbrook are one of the classic challenger banks in the specialist buy-to-let arena. They've done some research to some of their clients to find out how they're finding the market, what they're looking to do in 2022. And surprise, surprise, a good chunk of them are looking to buy more properties, at least one in the next 12 months. They say 14% are planning on buying more than one property. I guess that's lower than I would have expected. However, I guess we need to remember that sophisticated investors, and that's what you guys out there are on the journey to do, is to get educated and become sophisticated investors. There aren't as many of them out there as there are very sort of simple or accidental landlords who have one or two properties. So I guess that's possibly why that figure is down at 14%. But yeah, looking to buy more properties and continue on. Just give you a little idea of where the market is. With a Bank of England base rate change, so that was a rate rise just pre-Christmas, you would have expected me to be sitting here now telling you about some increase in interest rates on products. But all of these items here listed are reductions on what was available pre-Christmas, which that gives you an idea of where lenders are kind of at and where they're seeing 2022, which is they're still very keen. They've got very active funding lines that they're looking to get out. A 2-year fixed rate for a limited company buy-to-let at 75% loan to value is now at 2.59. A 5-year product from 2.89, which is a really low rate. And a 7-year product that hasn't actually changed much, but it's close, 2.94. But bridging's come down, and I've got an exclusive offer here, direct to lender, that I've been doing a lot of business with. So they give me an exclusive product, 75% loan to value. It can be done on serviced, so that provides you with a full 75% on drawdown at 0.69% per month, which is pretty much an industry leading rate, to be fair. And that's me.
The rate I've never seen before, I've got to be honest with you.
Incredible.
Yes.
Incredible.
Well done. That's we could stop the show now. It's that good.
Well,
just keep that slide for the next 2 hours. Bronwen.
That's fantastic news. So hi everybody, I'm Bronwen Vearncombe. This is my expert panel, and save the best to last. Just quickly run through why this panel is so important, and that's about education. First of all, I want to say Happy New Year to everybody, because we've been running this now for coming on for 2 years in March. So it just shows how popular it is, but also how much fun we have. So this year is going to be another fantastic year for everybody in terms of their learning. I'm a property investor, as is the rest of my panel. We're all investors in our own rights. I invest in Hampshire. I started about 8 years ago. I just had to work it out, actually, because similar to Teresa, I think, started what seems like not very long ago, but within 2 years, both my husband and I had been able to leave our corporate jobs. So it just shows you how property can turn your whole life around. You can change the whole way that you live, basically. So on that message there, I have a book that explains all about it, but I'm also a coach because I'm very passionate about sharing this stuff, because if I'd learned earlier, I would have had a lot more time having fun. So in my coaching this year already, I've probably coached about 15 people in the new year, and what is coming up time and time again is the following: fear. A lot of like, oh my goodness, it's the new year. I'm supposed to have a plan, aren't I? I'm supposed to have all these things I'm supposed to do. But with the year we've just had, people are quite tired. They want a new challenge, and also they want to make a difference in their lives. And if property can give you that, then you need to get some help and support. You can't do it on your own. You can try, you can look at YouTube. But, you know, a lot of the things I see is fear. People are scared because they believe what they read in the newspapers. They don't come along to this and hear us being really positive. They're very, very fearful. So to overcome that, the fear is to get an education and understand risk, but also to work with other people who are doing this, to work with people who are investing today and are going to be investing in the future. And then finally, the accountability that's provided by having somebody that can hold your hand, but somebody that can hold you to account with when you're going to be doing things towards your learning. There's a picture there on comfort zones. It's a big thing I talk about with people is don't jump ahead. Don't jump ahead and say, oh, I'm going to do this wonderful strategy called purchase lease options. You know, don't start with something complicated, start with something simple. So that's the big thing about this year, mindset, starting out with your education. And the next slide is about my book, where you can start. So if you want to start learning, you've got to choose somebody that matches your values, somebody you know and trust, somebody who's also investing, not just training. So there's lots of people out there. If you want to have a conversation with me, you're very welcome. I have an online program and I have a book, #1 Amazon best-selling book. So if you email me, I'd be happy to give you an insight into that book, maybe a free chapter. But the link along the bottom, I'll put in the chat box for Simon to put into the YouTube chat box. There's a bit of free training there. So if you're starting out in property, that 1 hour free training link might be just what you need this month. There we go. So
if you could put that in the chat box, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah,
anyone listening in, don't now just disappear, okay? Because this is great content that you're going to be receiving. So make sure you do it after this event. Yep. Ross, just one for you. People are saying they can't find your website to get onto the thing. Would you put that in your chat box?
Yep.
And I'll post that in there. And maybe if you take the next 5 people, can I twist your arm, take 5?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So if you've missed out, you think you've missed out, don't worry. Let's jump in.
I've had a couple of emails, so
you have already?
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Okay. Well, Ross is going to do an extra 2. How about that? So if Ross is going to put that into his chat box, I will then put that into here as well. So I'm going to stop the share, so we'll go back to that. What I'm going to do, guys, is, like I said, it is a live show. Now, my chat box is on my phone. So I want to take 2 before they disappear off my list because it's not on my laptop, unfortunately. So what I'm going to do is purposely go straight to YouTube Live where people have been posting questions. There's a couple I want to get the panel members on it, and then I'm going to go to the questions that people have been posting before per the registration. So Yazza is asked, hi all, let's talk about development. What would the panel set their minimum in regards to profit to GDP and profit to cost assessment of a development appraisal? I'm going to just probably leave it there for a sec. Actually, no, he said, it continues. Where are the current rates sitting for stretch senior debt to loan at cost at 85%? I guess that's 1 to Simon, but let's go to first of all to that first question, which is what kind of profit should people be making in terms of GDP? I can only ask you, Ross and Bronwen, because you're naturally closer to this. So what's your thoughts on what percentages people should be looking out for? And what dangers are there in terms of people just overstating it on their Excel spreadsheets? So
firstly, that's a great question. Secondly, as much as possible is the answer. Bronwen's probably going to be better to say the percentage because we will vary because of the way I would look at it to the way others would, because I can obviously carry out the work with my team. Just be aware, and as I said earlier, 20% contingency, whatever the builder comes back with, whatever your overall price is for the building works, add 20% to it. It may blow the budget, it may make it look like it's not doable, but please add it. And at the time scale as well. Don't think you're going to be getting it revenue in 3 months when they've told you it's 3 months. Bank on 4 months. Give yourself time every time. Bronwen, do you want to add?
Yep, I have a module on this that I did with one of my builders that I work with. So I'm more than happy to share that with you, Yasser, if you email me. In terms of the answer, there is no single answer. There are some rules of thumb which that module covers. My experience has been primarily to not actually do a contract with a builder for a development. What I tend to do is joint venture with somebody, because I don't want to have to project manage this. I don't want the risks of taking on that contract and then having to worry about it. So what I try to do with a lot of my investing now is to work with experts, to have somebody that ends up being part of the overall profit, so that we end up sharing the results. And that from my point of view is a real win-win. Obviously, if there are problems, which there usually is, then you resolve those together. But also if there's problems like we had trying to sell our last 8-house development, we couldn't sell them in the timescale that we planned. So we had to pay a lot more interest. And these things happen. So suddenly all our contingency went out the window. But no, I think it's a really good question. I will send you that link. And if anyone else wants it, just message me. It's all about how do you move from doing your standard investing through to doing development. And there's quite a lot of content there. So I'm happy to share that. Doesn't give you the answer, but.
Simon, we talked about obviously rates. We've obviously firstly saw the bridge loan finance rate that you mentioned. But what in terms of what's this person's just said actually?
Okay, right. So first, they were talking about how far they can stretch the loan to value. So typically within the marketplace at the moment, 90% loan to costs or 75% loan to GDV tend to be the higher markers that are being hit by lenders. A lot of it's going to depend on the project, where it is, the size of the project, and how much is being borrowed as to how much you can get the rates out. But there are rates in the marketplace from 6% with arrangement fees from 2% for the right projects at those kind of levels. Typically, though, obviously, if you borrow less, so you reduce your loan to value, then the risk to the lender goes down and they then can offer a better rate. So there's a bit of a balancing act. And it isn't always about getting the absolute cheapest rate for that type of deal, because in order to kind of offer the best rate, they've had to cut corners somewhere else in the whole package, and they can get really quite finicky when it comes to underwriting and getting the deal across the line. However, reach out to a good broker and they should be able to easily kind of match that up. Yeah.
Okay, over to you, Ross and Paul. So let's start with you, Ross.
Just a very quick one. Square meterage rates. I hear people ask me all the time, we're refurbing a house, what's the square meter rate you'd use? Unless you're really, really experienced, and believe me, I've been doing this for over 30 years, I don't use square meter rates. Get a fixed price, write a scope, get your build at a price against the scope, and make sure it's everything that you need done.
Brilliant point. Paul.
Hi. Two things to bear in mind, I would suggest, is one is, as Ross suggested, aim for your 20% contingency on time as well as cost. And that's essential because of the shortages in today's marketplace. So even if you're an LNPG member, you're still subject to the shortages. And worse still, there's price increases going through the roof. Wood particularly, and wood-derived products are becoming very expensive. The good news is that we've managed to withhold any major increase. We've limited it to 5% on the kitchen range. So we're in negotiations now on boilers. So we'll update you that in the near future. But going back to margin, I would suggest that, especially in this day and age, you should not be looking at anything less than 30% profit on GDP. Sorry, GDV, not GDP, GDV, because that way, if you achieve 30% or more, then you are definitely going to be able to refinance your project and take all your money out. So there you go. Just some advice. Minimum I would suggest is 30%. It may mean that will rule out a lot of developments. But given that prices are increasing and everything else, I urge on the side of caution rather than reducing as a sign of desperation. So good luck with that.
Perfect. I'm going to go to the questions now, what people have previously posted. And the first one I've got here is Rick is asking, if we bought investment properties in the UK, buy-to-lets and holiday lets, but resided in Australia eventually or possibly retire, what are the tax implications? And there's a few other things that they talked about as well on this point, but let's just talk about, and I'm doing a big slog on this in international tax, mainly in the States, Spain, Hong Kong, and the UK. I'm not venturing too much more than that, but one of the things I have been supporting people on in Australia is that they do have higher tax bands than the UK, but they will allow you to offset your mortgage interest. So typically what you'll find is that in each country, whichever way you're going, anyone listening to this program should understand that you've got different elements of the way that HMRC will treat costs. Section 24, for instance, you are restricted on the amount of mortgage interest, but in some countries you're allowed the full amount. Australia is one of them. But in some countries, they may not allow you to have offset your replacement costs, such as America, because they will capitalize some of those costs. So whenever you're thinking about moving to a different country, you do need to think about, well, how do they treat my income and how do they tax it? So for example, Hong Kong, for instance, I think they, Tony Fung's online actually, but they will tax you a flat rate of tax on your gross income. And it's actually very low. I think it's about 15% or something daft like that. So you do have to be very, very wary when it comes to international tax. Not only have you got in terms of property income, but you've also got to think about, well, how am I going to be affected for capital gains tax? Inheritance tax is a huge one. Australia have no inheritance tax, yet the UK has one of the biggest ones. If you go to Spain, for instance, it's very complicated over there for inheritance tax. So you do need to think about that, but it can be quite costly. And indeed, I've been working with Simon Hodgson about mortgages as well. So I'm going to stop there with that because you could go on all night, and I'd rather not. But I think if you are looking for international tax advice, make sure you get good advice. I've paid thousands over to the so-called Big Four, and they've probably been the worst organisations I've ever faced when it comes to international tax. They don't actually know international tax. They know tax in that country, which is what most accountants will do, but they don't actually know the two countries you're talking about. So it's very, very frustrating. So you do make sure you get someone who's knowledgeable in two countries at least, not proclaiming, oh yes, I know every single country. No, you don't. So I'll get off my high horse on that one, actually. Nick has asked, my wife and I have several properties in our portfolio that have low D EPC ratings. How worried should we be about the plan for landlords to be upgraded their properties to a minimum C by 2025? And are there any tax reliefs for such work? What advice can the panel offer? Why don't we go to, first of all, Simon Hodgson, because obviously there's some mortgage issues, but then over to Teresa, because I know that, Teresa, you've been talking about that for some time.
Okay, well, within the world of mortgages, there are an increasing number actually coming to the marketplace of EPC-friendly mortgages, i.e. you can get a better rate if you've got a better EPC on your property. So whilst you might have to spend some money out in the start of the process, i.e. to carry out the works and make it a better EPC performance, you can then save that money back in terms of interest rates over the term of a mortgage. There are also products out there that will allow you to borrow the refurbishment costs in order to update the EPC rating if you haven't got those funds available, and it can then be remortgaged on the back of that with potentially an uplift in value if you've also carried out, let's say, some updates on the boiler and other bits and bobs, so therefore potentially increase the value. So there's a number of ways you potentially can recycle the cash or get access to the cash to do those works. I'm sure the other members are going to talk about those types of properties that would be exempt, because there will be a few, especially older properties, that wouldn't necessarily need to comply fully, as I understand. Maybe one for Ross, don't know.
Right, just bring Teresa on. Come on, Teresa.
Right, yeah, I'll give my 2 pennies worth. Well, it's clear that the government are wanting to raise the EPC levels, that's for sure. So that is correct. From 2025 for all new tenancies, they're expecting properties to be minimum a C rating, and then it's for all tenancies from 2028. But as with all things government, excuse me, it's a shambles, because currently there isn't the funding there, there isn't the clarity there for landlords on how they're going to achieve that. What I would say, just to be very, very careful of doing any sort of refurbishment work, thinking that you're going to raise the energy efficiency. It's quite common for people to be looking at, if they've got electric heating, just thinking about, oh, we'll whip out the storage heating and we'll put in efficient like panel heaters. But then an EPC assessor will come along and they'll just downgrade it. So you could spend a lot of money and actually not gain very much. So, you have to be very careful on what measures you do take to raise the energy efficiency. I'm sure Ross has got probably more to say about that. But yeah. I mean, the NRA are constantly lobbying the government, for, efficient, for funding for landlords and, sort of for tax breaks for landlords. But as yet, nothing has transpired.
There's a good blog on the NRLIA site. I'll pick up the link because I sent it to someone recently.
Oh, right.
Gives you a really good background as to the lobbying and what's going on, because, we can't be certain, it's a challenging time, but I wouldn't make any massive decisions on it right yet. Over to Ross.
Yeah, I mean, 4 areas to look at for EPCs. Boiler is an obvious one. It needs to be high efficiency. We've on the panel 2-3 months ago, we went through air source heat pumps, and I've recently done an exercise with somebody close to me, looking at electric heating, electric boilers. The science doesn't really have the answer yet. It certainly doesn't have the answer in terms of cost. And it will always cost you. So a good high efficiency boiler is one of the items. Insulation, there's all sorts of grants available for insulation. Make sure your loft's insulated. If you're going to insulate your walls, check what they're using. Check the age of your property. If it's pre-1920s-ish, I would be really cautious. Fixed appliances, remember your fixed appliances, they've all got an EPC rating, they're all taken into account. And windows. And if you're going to change your windows, which most landlords would for condensation and damp issues, if nothing else, make sure they're fencer certified. So you can find all of that on the fencer website.
Just on that point, obviously we talked about properties in the 1920s. Paul.Hilliard, you know a lot about the 1920s. Why don't you give us your views on this matter?
Oh, when you're there first time around, it's very easy to learn from the experience. So thank you, Simon. That's some excellent points from Ross. I'd add one more point, because surprisingly, LED lighting significantly improves your EPC rating. So again, add that to the list that Ross has just given you. Also bear in mind that the best place to learn from this is going to be your EPC itself, because there should be recommendations on there. Obviously, they tend to be costed and quoted. So good, have a decent look at that. So if not, if you haven't had an EPC, then speak to an EPC assessor. And if you haven't got one, then just check on the there is an EPC register online that the government promotes. But one thing to bear in mind, if you're confident that you know what you're doing, then bear in mind that the councils and housing associations will be unloading lots of their properties that aren't going to achieve those requirements. So just like last time, about 10 years ago, there were lots of opportunities there. The auction houses were full of council houses being sold out that were...
Have they got any left, Paul?
I can let you have a few if you like. But
the council have already got shed all their properties.
Oh, you're living in the wrong council then.
Oh.
But I mean, don't forget, council houses weren't available in the 1920s. So just remember that. When you're as old as I am, you can remember these things.
Simon, you had your hand up. You put it back down again.
I did all but briefly. Not necessarily as a comprehensive list, but in general, if you've got a mid-age property, not particularly old, not particularly new, roof insulation number 1, floor insulation number 2, cavity wall insulation number 3, double glazing, condensing boiler, LED lighting, and individual thermostatic valves and temperature sensing in each room will typically get you to a C just, but you do need to double check.
And all available from LNPG sources.
Oh, straight in there, straight in there.
What teamwork? That's what we love.
Then, Ross, have your final piece, because I want to move on to the next question.
Loads of questions.
Underfloor heating. If you're refurbing, look at underfloor heating. Highly efficient, very good if you're going to go air source heat pump in the near future.
Cool. Okay. There you go, guys. I think that's absolutely amazing content already from this show. Anthony's asked if buying a flat. In fact, there was a question on YouTube Live. I want to answer that one quickly. Someone's asked about should I have HMOs and holiday lets in the same limited company. Just a quick on this, because this is something that my tax advisors and I frequently debate on different subjects. But one thing you have to be aware of is VAT. If you've got a business that eventually is doing good results, then your holiday let business may have to be VAT registered. Mixing that with a limited company that has normal buy-to-lets restricts you from using the flat rate VAT scheme, because you would have to charge VAT, a flat rate scheme, on all properties, even though it's residential, bizarrely enough. So you'd have to pay a flat rate over to HMRC on your total rental income, which really is ludicrous. So just be wary of that. So whenever you're looking at company structures, try and hiven off things like buy-to-let property portfolio, which is just rental, away from anything that could be considered trade or business related, such as holiday lets. Okay, just a point on that. Anthony's asked, back to the questions that people have asked when they've registered. Anthony's asked, if I'm buying a new flat and I need to check the lease, what are the things I need to look for? Can I sublet it if I'm actually living in it to begin with? Tim, you're the man.
So many things when it comes to leases. I think the first thing to do is actually look at the length of the lease, because there are issues there if you have a short lease. And certainly one of the tricks at the moment is make sure if you are looking to extend your lease, it doesn't drop below 8 years because the price goes up. The government are changing certain things, but they're not backdating stuff. So that's number one. There can be restrictions on what you can and can't do. I think a lot of people think that once they own a flat, they own a flat, but actually there are all sorts of things that they can't do. Now, that every lease varies. It's not like an AST, which is fairly standard. You know, the AST, everyone looks the same, they're vanilla. Leases of long leasehold properties are completely different. So everyone is different. So some, for example, might say you can't sublet. Other ones might say you can't have more than one family in the house. Others might say for every time you want to do even small internal decorations, you have to get the approval of the freeholder who will charge you. So everyone is different. So I think actually asking what to look for is quite difficult. You need to go through the whole thing and you need to know your lease. If you're not sure what something means, make sure your solicitor explains it. I think there are far too many people who simply think that all the lease things are boring and it goes over their head, and then they find they can or can't do things they think they could do. So it's really a question of looking at your lease, but certainly the length of the lease is always the first thing to do, and then also particularly what you can and can't do. And of course, watch out for service charges. Always make sure you know what service charges are likely to be, if there are any big things coming up, because that can be one that catches people sometimes. They don't think they've got any particularly big service charges because the last few years have been bad. But in fact, what they don't know is there's a major redevelopment taking place. You know, perhaps the entire roof needs replacing. Well, suddenly in 1 year, unless you've got a sinking fund, which is a fund which they develop over years, sometimes they have that. If there's no sinking fund, you may suddenly have to pay an awful lot. And if there is a sinking fund, you may well find that the new purchaser actually wants to recompense their share of the sinking fund. So suddenly, in addition to buying the property, you've got to put a big cash in. So it's a long question. I could go for ages. I already have. So read your lease, but look in particular at the length of the lease and make sure if you don't know what it says, find a solicitor who can explain in clear English.
So before we go on to Paul.Hilliard, because when we listen to Paul.Hilliard, we too have to sink in our chairs. Paul.Hilliard, over to you.
Thank you for that. One thing to be wary of, or extremely cautious of, if there's any arrears on the service charges or ground rent, that they will be transferred to you unless you're very astute on your commercial, on your legal transaction. So just be wary on that. And just to re-emphasise what Tim was saying, in my view, there are two rules on on leases, and that is 1, read the lease, and number 2 is look at number 1, read the lease. End of story. Thank you.
I must admit, it's getting quite eerie when you get that close to the camera here, Paul. You might want to just sink into your chair just to stop the fright. Lisa's asked the question. I viewed an old Edwardian terrace property. Paul.Hilliard probably owned it when it first came out. And there were some large cracks. Oh, here we go again. Some wide cracks coming in here as well. So some large cracks in the walls and above the doors on the first floor. What do I need to do to get it checked out? The owner hasn't decorated for many years. Ross, is that a good sign for you to come in?
It's a bit like looking at a car. If you open the bonnet and the engine's all dirty, I'd rather see a dirty engine than a nice clean one. And it sounds like this place is a nice, almost original, when Paul first owned it, house. The cracks and things, very difficult to say without seeing it, but they could be just normal settlement. And again, somebody very close to me bought a property that had some quite severe settlement and successfully managed to mortgage it, and we've refurbed it, and it looks like it was when it was brand new. So there are things you can do. I would be really cautious. If you've got somebody you can talk to, a structural guy, a structural engineer will come and have a look. Not a huge amount of money to get a structural engineer to do a quick report on it. If it is over windows and doors, you can relax a little bit because the windows and doors would be traditionally timber. They will move because wood's a natural product, it moves. So you might find it's just that worth spending a few £100 to get a structural engineer's opinion.
Perfect. Good. We're flying through the questions, which is good because there's quite a few coming in. So I'm going to go to the next question. Was Colin is asked, how do I check if a property is in the flood risk area? Will an agent know? Well, even if they did know, I'm not sure they'll always tell you. What's the best way to find if a property is in a floodplain? Does anyone know? Simon Hodgson, you must know because you talked about this about 6 months ago. You're on mute.
Muty.
Mutiny.
Simon, you're on
The
mute.
mutiny. Yeah. He doesn't know how to mute himself. Look, here we go. There you go.
Oh no, and again. Yeah.
All right.
Try again.
Paul.Hilliard.
It's done.
Here he is. Look.
Sorry, everybody. The panel are playing games with me. When I unmute myself, they go, yeah, you know. Ha ha ha. Sorry. Yes, if you do a Google search, flood risk site, you'll come up with a .gov website. You can then literally put in your postcode and have a quick little look. And it is very good. It will give you flood risk, bandings, designations. That's the first place to start. The next.
Can I just say straight away, Simon, all the panel members are doing it, and I can tell. Typing on their laptops. Oh, what's that?
You say education live as you see it on the screen.
Even for the panel members. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're here for. We're always learning, aren't we?
We're all always learning. Paul.Hilliard, you had your hand up. Is there any reason for that? Are you going to contribute?
Yeah, obviously the .gov.uk is the key website, but for service water flooding, check with your local council. And finally, the other tip I always say is speak to your insurance broker, because they will be able to identify, if you put that postcode in and say, can I insure this property? They will immediately flag up if there's a flood risk on the area or if it's been affected by flood, and identify any other bad things such as crime rates or underpinning requirements. So there you go.
I'm going to stick with you for a second, but Bronwen, Paul, and Ross, don't mind who jumps into this question, but Tony Fung, who's a frequent attendee of this show, so good evening to you, sir, is asked the question, for a simple buy-to-let, I started with my local area, but then what else is a good area to invest in 2022? Any ideas? Because obviously you've got the north, east, south, west divide of the UK. Where would you throw your dart of investments?
Well, I think you've got to know an area pretty well. It's not just about putting, asking the panel, we all invest in areas that we know extremely well, because there's so many factors to take into account. I did a post on my Facebook page recently, which showed house price changes. That's one thing to look at and go, right, what's happening in the economy. Certainly the government have been investing quite heavily in the Northeast. So that sort of tipped as quite a cheap area to buy, but also where the government's investing. But, you can't beat a busy city with quite a good economy. So, again, it depends on your tenant type. So, yeah, let's move on to someone else's suggestion, but I'll dig out that picture and link and put it in the chat box for you.
Simon,
Sorry.
okay, I was just going to say that I'm a simple soul. When things go wrong, I want to be within a 10 or 15 mile radius, maybe because I go out personally. If you've got a really good team local, so if you're on the south coast like I am, personally, I wouldn't invest Manchester, Blackpool way. I know people do, and I know some people that make it really successful, but it's down to the team they've got up there. Remember, the minute, if you're in the south coast like me, it's 4 hours to Manchester. The minute something goes wrong and you're needed, you've got a 4-hour drive to get there.
Paul?
That's a good point. I would also suggest you look at what you're intending to achieve with your investment. Is it capital appreciation or is it income? Obviously, the further north you go, the better the income return. But if you're looking for capital appreciation, although you always say London prices are stable, slight decline at the moment. So check the and survey that Bronwen suggested earlier. But also look at HS2 locations. So Birmingham is a prime city that's looking at growth at the moment. But I would suggest, please look elsewhere: Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, anywhere apart from Birmingham and Oxford. So there you go. Because those are my.
Don't invest in Birmingham, because that's where Mr. Hilliard invests, and he doesn't want extra competition. That's why he's saying that. Right, Mr. Bishop, would you come on board?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with everyone else broadly. 45 minutes to an hour, absolute max where you live. Certainly, that's what I do. And I saw another property today, again, right on the edge of that 45 minutes. But one thing I did want to add, actually, I did some research on this a few years ago. When major developments like HS2 or the Docklands Railway are going to happen, everyone thinks, oh, the prices will go up, the prices will go up. Well, they may do, but what's really interesting, according to all the research, is the prices only go up when it's actually been completed. So therefore, if you are going to buy, it's quite canny to buy when you know it's definitely going to happen for sure, because quite often government plans, they make plans, but it doesn't actually happen. But before it happens, because prices only seem to go up when it's actually happened, even if they know it's going to happen. So to me, it's a bit like standing in a railway tunnel. You're standing in a railway tunnel, you see a light coming towards you. You don't wait for the train to hit you, actually. You act before that. And that's where the money's to be made. So if you think there is going to be a significant increase followed government investment, don't wait until it's actually happened. Wait until it's happening.
For anyone in risk and self-assessment of risk, don't even go on the train track in the first place. It's my sporting point. So just on a couple of things, I've shared a couple of links with you all, actually. First of all, I shared the link for the flood risk areas, so you should have that now, so feel free to do that. Bronwen has also shared something about the house prices as well, some stats for you to look at. So make sure you do download some of these links. Some of these links that we're downloading is some fantastic links, and we should have an encyclopedia of this kind of stuff because it's really, really useful. Keith has asked a question: if I manage single let property myself and do the contract, etc., do I need to take a deposit from the tenant? If it's a friend, can I avoid it? I'm going to go back to you, Tim. Even friends and family. I mean, my family members do watch this channel and they know I'm joking, but I don't trust them. So, Tim, what would you say on this matter?
I'd ask one of my team. I don't know the answer to this particular one. I'm going to pass it across to someone who's far more knowledgeable. I'm going to try Teresa. Do you know?
Well, I would say it's a choice thing with a deposit. A deposit's there to protect the landlord for when the tenant leaves. Perhaps, not paying the rent or leaving damages to the property. So, I mean, there are landlords out there who who specifically don't take a deposit because it's so complicated with the paperwork that if you like mess up the paperwork, then you're liable for the tenant claiming like 3 times the deposit plus a deposit back from you if you make a mess of it. So some landlords don't take a deposit. I mean, there are options to take out a deposit guarantee, like deposit insurance. That's a cheaper option. So the person could like just pay 1 week's rent and be protected for the entire year. So you're not having to take a big lump sum off them. But I mean, if you're confident with them being a friend that they won't leave the property damaged and they're going to pay the rent.
Don't trust them. Right,
Simon just says don't trust them.
No.
I think that's probably a good way to go. Yeah.
Can I perhaps add, on that certainly as people who get involved in litigation and all sorts of issues, it's often between people you know quite well. Relationships are absolutely fine until something goes wrong. When money's involved, if there's either too much money or there's not enough, that can mean even the greatest of friends and very close family members fall out, and it's horrible, absolutely horrible to watch. So, you do have to be careful, even with friends and family, however well you know them, there can be risks.
Yeah. Paul.Hilliard, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I've got no friends, so I'm happy to rent. But my advice would be always take a deposit, but make sure you protect it in the prescribed manner, because your friends may quickly become a tenant who will love you until you say no, or even worse, expect them to pay the rent on time. So just bear that in mind.
Very good point. Karen Meadows on YouTube, it says, want to chat to Ross definitely about cracks. I have a potential interesting project and looking for a JV, great rates for investors. So hopefully, we have to be a bit careful with FCA regulations, Karen, about what percentages. So I'm glad you've not put that down. But hopefully that Ross will help you with the other side of that crack situation. Ray Denton, again on YouTube Live. So good to see you there. Refurb existing buy-to-let to service accommodation. Do you think refurb should be significantly high quality, standard fittings, etc. in kitchens and bathrooms? I'm going to give you my take on this, and then any other panel members who wants to jump in. If you're doing a buy-to-let, you can't really directly compare, I don't think, anyway, a standard buy-to-let property that you're renting on a monthly basis versus one that you're renting on a short-term basis, because your competition is hotels. And therefore, the standard of your service accommodation needs to be equal, if not better, than hotels, so you can then charge a rent. So I've posted quite a bit on our first project that we've done in Spain, and I purposely looked at all the properties in about 3-mile radius. I said, right, well, how do I improve on every aspect of this, whether that's in the living room, bathrooms, kitchen areas, wherever. Looking at soft furnishings, the TVs, the technology that we use, the paintings on the walls, the furnishings. My view, you've got to be the best out there. Competition is hotting up. Airbnb, there are so many properties on there that unless you are better. So if you're trying to compare buy-to-let to SA, you're in the wrong ballpark. You should be looking at what other people are doing on Airbnb, and that is your new benchmark, not your standard buy-to-let properties. Bronwen, Paul, I know you guys do SA, so do you, Tim. Any thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, serviced accommodation, think about who you're trying to attract. It isn't necessarily holiday makers. So for us, we have quite a lot of people who are coming to work in the area. So for them, what they want is a good kitchen, because they want to be able to cook in a group. So there may be a group of contractors coming down, much rather have a really nice apartment or house even. It cuts the costs down. So you want really good television, brilliant Wi-Fi, great kitchen, and it's going to rent day in, day out. So do your research, check what the demand is going to be in the area. Go and have a look at some other cottages, holiday rentals in the area, as if you were going to be renting it. That's a good research to do as well. Paul, other points?
I totally agree with everything you said. Know your market, because the last thing I would do is upmarket your property if you're going to target the contractor market. But on top of that, don't forget, LNPG will provide all the furniture and soft furnishings that you need. So thank you very much for that opportunity to promote LNPG again.
Yeah, and Louise won't ever do without Farron Ball, I've got to be honest, through LNPG. So absolutely brilliant. Ross, you got your hand up.
Yep, just one thing from me is get your team in place. Service accommodation, I get numerous calls, probably every week, from somebody panicking. They've got no team in place. Plumber, electrician, essential.
Yeah, perfect. We're talking about, oh, Paul, you got your hand up again, sorry, mate.
Just one important thing. Once you've got it to the standard that you desire, then the other thing is find the team that will look after it. So not only the electricians and the plumbers, but your cleaner. Don't go for a standard cleaner because they will only do it to a standard buy-to-let and not do the ultimate spring clean every time.
I'm going to stay with you, Paul, because you mentioned about rent to rent, if it's okay. I know by the time you've done half an hour, because of your age, you fade away quite quickly. So I'm going to try and keep you going for a while. Sarah's asked a question, how much money do I need to start with when it comes to investing? Do I need to own my own home? Well, that's a no, Sarah, straight away. I've heard rent to rent, you don't need too much money to invest. Ooh, I think that could be quite a tricky one, couldn't it? Sometimes you don't have to put too much money to invest in a rent to rent, but what's your experience?
Well, what I would suggest is that before you even consider rent to rent, speak to Bronwen, get a good education, otherwise you will have to learn on the job based on the mistakes you make. And there are a lot of mistakes you can make with a rent to rent. The other thing to do is tell everyone you're becoming a property investor, and close friends and family should want to invest and support you. So they may even do it financially. So always bear that in mind. You mentioned rent to rent. It's a good way to start without significant funding, but you are still likely to need a deposit, 1 month's rent up front, and DU funds. And DU funds are due up. So if you're converting from a single let to a HMO, you'll need funds for the HMO license, compliance for the fire doors, interlinked smoke alarms, door locks, etc., etc. So, it's not as simple as saying, oh, I can get in and do it cheap. It can cost you, especially if you're not prepared. So, as I said, first step, get educated first.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, quite often there's hidden costs and things. So as Paul mentioned, even if you're doing just a simple buy-to-let, it's much, much more than just your 25% deposit, because you're going to have other fees to take into account. And then, of course, you must always, one of the 5 golden rules is you must always have a cash buffer in case of need, because that boiler might break, the Wi-Fi might have problems, and those are things you've got to react to very quickly. So you've got to have funds. It could be a credit card, but you never want to be in debt in this game. You always want to be ahead of things, because if you have a void for any reason, again, you need to have some capacity there. So yeah, part of it is education. Rent to rent is not the simplest of strategies, I can tell you. You've got to be trustworthy. You've got to speak the language. You have to deal with landlords who have got loads more experience than you have if you're starting out. So credibility, doing a really good education course is really important, because you've got to come across as confident. So there's loads and loads of strategies. My free training touches on pretty much all of them from that link I put in earlier. So if you want to have a feel for what are the strategies out there, that might be a good one to watch if you're starting out.
Yeah, good point. Okay, I'm going to go to the next question. A guy is not sure, he's 40, he got money in his pension, but he wants to take money out of it. Bronwen, Tim, you've done this in terms of SAS pensions. Why don't you talk about your experience of SAS pensions?
Well, a pension is something that people don't look at very often, because you just file it because you think, oh, I can't touch that till I'm 55 or retired. At 55, you can take 25% out tax-free, which is really quite useful, especially if you're in property. But the ultimate, and I'm not a pensions advisor here, this is not advice, but the ultimate is to look at different pension types like SIPs or SASs. So small self-administered scheme is an entrepreneur's pension, a pension that you can transfer other pensions into and then take control of that. But you can only do that within very strict HMRC rules. you need to prove that you've got a limited company that's trading, and there's all sorts of other little sort of red flags that you need to know about. But certainly I have a SAS. I know Tim has a SAS. I've been able to, and Ross, of course, because Ross invests some of his with us. And, you know, a SAS gives you flexibility. It also gives you a legacy into the future, because my kids can inherit it. Whereas if I died with my other pension, they wouldn't see it. So all sorts of positives. I'll let someone else mention some other positives.
I'm just trying to think of anything more than Bronwen's just said. Yeah, it's something I'm doing at the moment. I think it's a good idea. I'm somebody who didn't have a pension, so I'm starting from scratch. I think I've got a pension worth £2,000, and I think it's increased in value by about 20% in about 30 years. So in terms of actual increase, it's pretty poor. So I'm expecting to get a slightly better response from the SAS, and I'm putting an office into it. So yeah, and then I expect to do the same again and again. So yeah, I think they're a good idea, very flexible. And again, like Bronwen, the purpose is I hate the idea of a pension dying with you. So this won't. This will simply go on to my two boys as part of their inheritance. So yeah, cracking idea. If you haven't got a pension, it's worth looking at a SAS. And if you have got one, then unless it's one of the government pensions, provided a lot of them you can transfer across. So if it's an ordinary works pension, you may well be able to transfer it across anyway, and well worth considering.
Ross?
Yeah, just to say, Bronwen and John taught me about SASs and have helped me with that over the years. I bought 3 properties successfully. Just remember, you've got to have security. So you've got to have a first charge on a property to secure the funds.
Perfect one. Thank you for that. A couple of questions. Obidan has asked a question. I'm investing in LLC. That's interesting. LLCs, Obidan, is a American company structure. So LTD is a UK. Just let me know if that's what you meant. But you said in here that you're investing personal funds and looking to invest and charge your limited company interest. Can you do so? The answer will be yes, you can charge your limited company interest. And a lot of our clients do that to a point that actually you can take, depending on how you do it. But there are ways to take out either £500 as a high rate taxpayer tax-free, £1,000, which is a basic rate taxpayer tax-free. There is also a way to find out to get £6,000 interest tax-free as well. And we've just helped a couple of clients do that, but it's really specific criteria in order to do that. And your taxable earnings can't be that significant. So yes, you can do that, but do correct me if I'm saying the right thing in terms of LLC. If you're talking about American thing, it's a different thing. I can answer that as well, but I'm thinking you're referencing the UK limited company structure. Sam's asked a question. Purchase lease options are being talked about a lot in the groups I'm in, mainly Facebook, I suspect, but I'm confused as to how they can work for me. Do any of the panel use this strategy of option agreements? Before we do that, Tim, I've seen a lot of people fall foul of this when they enter in a purchase lease agreement and they get the keys and they formally exercise the contract, that there's generally could be a stamp duty land tax issue.
I have to say that we the only thing really we get involved with property that we don't do is purchase lease options. So if you're looking at an ordinary option, we do them all the time. But we took a view a few years ago not to do them. There are quite a few complications and risks, particularly for solicitors. Because effectively you're taking over a property when actually somebody else got an interest. What happens if they died? All sorts of issues. So I'm not saying you shouldn't do them, but as solicitors, it's the only thing we decided it was too risky for us as solicitors to advise on. So therefore, I can't really add anything more than that.
Fair enough.
Yes, so you need to use a specialist solicitor. So I've done 2 purchase lease options, and I've got 2 long leases where the owner didn't want to do the purchase bit, or not yet anyway. So they can be really good in certain situations, but it isn't a strategy that I would recommend you start with, but also that you go out directly and that's the only thing you do. Because the reason somebody would sign a purchase lease option with a landlord is because that landlord doesn't need the funds now. So let me just explain what a purchase lease option is for those that are probably thinking I'm talking double Dutch. So a purchase lease option is where you agree with the owner of the property to lease it for a period of time, usually 5 to 6 years, something like that. It could be longer, but not less, I would suggest. So you lease it, so you rent it from them. So a bit like rent to rent, but there's an option to buy it. So you can then agree to buy it at a fixed price that you've agreed at that point within that period of time. Okay, so you exercise it within the 5-6 years that you've agreed. You exercise it at the amount that you've agreed, and you don't have to do that. So if you find out that after 3 or 4 years, your strategy with that property isn't working, or your circumstances have changed, you're not obliged to buy it. You don't have to buy it. Why would somebody do that? Well, because A, they don't need the money now. Perhaps the owner hasn't invested much in the property. Maybe they've been using it and renting it before, but they haven't got the funds to maybe, refurbish it. Or they've had enough, they want to retire, they want to move away. But it's still an asset for them if someone else rents it from them. So if they don't need the money now, if they want to walk away and still get an income from it, it's a huge opportunity for an investor. But you do need to get that education. That's the word that I will always use. Let's move over to Paul, because I know he's got experience of this as well.
Yeah, thanks, Bronwen. I think the thing to remember, Sam, is you said you're confused, and that strongly suggests you do need to get education. So do not hesitate. Speak to Bronwen. The key factors that Bronwen explained is, it limits your opportunities to where the seller does not need the cash, and that is a very limited market. So yes, as a professional investor, it is part of my armory, but I do not actively focus on PLO deals because it is a very, very small market. But there are opportunities out there, particularly with tired landlords who don't necessarily need the money at the moment, but will still benefit from the income coming in. So yeah, there's opportunities there, but really understand that it's not a first past the post strategy for an investor.
I mean, just on that point, just before I go on to the next question, because we've got quite a few questions to go through, but I can tell you guys now, there are about 5 or 6 clients that have gone bust because they've gone with purchase lease options, and the people that own the property have pulled the rug underneath their feet. So similar to rent, sometimes you have to be a bit careful with that, but purchase lease options, very much the same. The person sold the house without letting them know. The court said, well, it's only a piece of paper, tough. So there you go. So don't be careful with what you think you can get a judge to help you on a case where you feel that you've been wronged by, because they don't care. Kalp has asked a question: when would an LLP be appropriate for landlords with 5-6 properties? What are the criteria? And to be honest, Kalp, I would always want to say that you probably need a tax strategy to understand what your situation is now, but also in the future, and who else is going to be in this thing as well. So an LLP, like a limited company, or you're in your personal name, or in a trust, there are so many things, but it's not necessarily a generic answer that can be given, and it'd be wrong for anyone to try and do that by this kind of thing. So it's a case-by-case basis. Kalpa, get some advice, understand what you're trying to achieve, and then get the right solution is always the answer I would give. Caroline has asked, a relative is interested in a shared ownership idea to buy his first property. I already owned property and I'm not interested in a mortgage with him. Want to help out, but as an investment, any views on legal implications? Again, Tim, any thoughts from a legal aspect?
I'm not entirely sure what they're planning in terms of the investment. It's almost certain, although you will need to check the lease, as I said earlier, but normally shared ownership properties do not allow you to sublet. So number one, the idea of having a rented property, it doesn't work. Secondly, if you want to increase your share, there are costs. It's a great way for someone to get on the housing ladder, but I do wonder why you would actually invest in this rather actually in some other form of property. So for example, if you buy a share and then you want to increase your share, it's called staircasing. But every time you staircase, there are various costs involved. There are legal costs, etc., etc. So if you're actually looking to buy a property, your costs are going to be higher. It also may well be that you might have problems actually where the initial funding came from. Because certainly when you're going for a mortgage, obviously one of the things your solicitor is going to say is where do your own funds come from? And I imagine my team who do deal with a lot of shared ownership probably have to ask the same question. So I'm not sure how practical this is, and I'm not sure why you do it, to be honest.
Okay, you heard it here first. So let's just go into the next question. Matthew's asked, what is the easiest way to gain investors to help and fund your deals? Ooh, big old question. I mean, any panel members that have got sought out money, and what's the best vehicle to get money from investors? Everyone's silent.
I know I do a lot, but I've spoken a lot tonight. So shall I kick off? Because this is a big part of my training that I love to teach people, because in the first year that we started out, we were very ambitious, but we only had enough for a couple of properties. We ended up buying 5, I think it was, that year. And that was because we borrowed from other people. And this is not going cap in hand. This was actually telling people what it was we were doing, finding people that we already know, ex-colleagues, friends, family. A bit like Caroline, you want to help them out. If you can actually borrow funds from other people and give them a return on their money, it's a win-win. And it's, as I said, never ask for funds. And again, I've got a brilliant module on this that I always get great feedback on. So if someone wants a little bit more information as to how to go about doing it, more than happy to share that hour's training if you want it. Anyone else?
Anyone else? Anyone else?
I was just going to say credibility. I mean, if it's a refurb, it's fairly easy for me to get funds, but it's credibility. I look for credibility in people. Do they know what they're doing? Have they got a robust plan? Obviously, projects for me, I'm looking at the refurb costs. I'm looking at the in and the out, and the 3 exit strategies. And everybody's got 3 exit strategies. Everybody's 3 exit strategies seem to be different. Mine is going to be different to others, but make sure you've got exit strategies.
Simon Hodgson, did you have any views on this at all?
Yeah, I was kind of echoing from Bronwen, really. I can't emphasize enough the importance of getting a little bit of education. If it costs you £500 to get a bit of education and hone the presentation that you do to win the deal, it has to be money well spent. Don't try and do it off the back of your head, off yourself, off your own back. Do a little bit of research on the internet and then present it. Because if you burn that one lead, you've lost it. You can never go back. So you've got to go as well prepared as possible. And I can't emphasize enough, if you learn from someone who's done it successfully, and that's Bronwen, you are massively ahead in terms of your chances of success. And once you've got one done, it's then easy to go on and do the others. But getting the first one is really hard, I would suggest.
Yeah, but there's a lot of people out there with money sitting in a bank, just not getting enough return on it. So you don't have to pay a huge amount to an investor. Just what is it that they want and need? Those are the sorts of questions, because you're actually helping them out as well as benefiting. So think about it that way, and then you're thinking about it in the right way, in my opinion.
On that point, Bronwen, just very quickly, because we've got to get these questions through. But my experience is when I saw a friend do this, that they gave a rate of something like 1% per month. Their own family members thought it was a rip-off scheme and then didn't invest. They went to a friend and said 8%, and the friend invested. So sometimes you have to be a bit careful as well. You might be thinking, well, am I being generous enough? Actually, it could be too generous, and people think it's their Ponzi scheme. So be careful. Bronwen, I'm going to stay with you actually, because Jimmy's asked the question: is HMO still a good investment? Bear in mind we've got COVID, and where would you find hotspots for HMOs? So let's go with you, Bronwen, first, and then Paul.Hilliard second.
Yeah, houses of multiple occupation. It's a house that's shared. People are sharing the facilities. Sometimes they'll have an ensuite of their own, but they generally will be sharing kitchens and communal areas. In terms of COVID, people think of HMOs as being students because that's historically, where people were sharing. Now, actually, there's a lot of young professionals and actually older people, perhaps divorcees. I have a whole HMO that's divorcees, believe it or not. People are happier and it's cheaper to share, but they're happier to be in a community. Now, in terms of COVID, there were various rules and regulations, but people sharing a house or a bubble. If one of them gets COVID, then you have some house rules, and the agent who managing it, puts those in place. Pretty much all my HMOs were fully occupied during COVID. Yes, some of them may have lost their jobs, but actually they got paid quite a lot on furlough and weren't doing very much. So I probably had a much better income during COVID than I did when they were out partying and didn't have money left at the end of the month. So that's my experience. But yeah, HMO is always going to be around. They're a great option for people who don't want to spend a huge amount on their own flat. I think for young professionals, really high quality, it's a brilliant solution. Anyone else? Paul, I know you do HMOs as well.
I'm going to go to Tim just before, because he's got his hand up there.
Yeah, thanks. I've had no problem with my HMO during COVID either, like you, Bronwen. But I mentioned this in a previous session. I don't have the stats in front of me, but the information came from some really interesting research in The Economist. Broadly, if you look at demographics, in other words, how the population is spread. In fact, we're going through a boom at the moment, and between 2020 roughly and by 2030, I think there's going to be an increase, something like 30% of 20 to 30-year-olds. And in my experience, certainly probably the age range that goes most with HMO is obviously once they've left home and before perhaps they've settled down to eventual property if they've found one to let or to buy in due course. So probably your 20 to 30, I would say, your ideal market. And in the next 10 years, that's going to increase by 30%. It then dips in the future. So I'd say for the next 10 years, HMO requirements, the demand for HMOs, depending on the area, will increase significantly.
Perfect. Just on a quick one, actually, Bronwen, we obviously had our WhatsApp chat about today's registrations and so on. We've got 100 people on the show. So watching. So out of you 100 people watching this show tonight, well done, guys, for registering, and thank you as well, because it matters so much that you guys are watching us, and constantly we're trying to make this show even better month in, month out. So thank you for joining. But do make sure that you subscribe to this YouTube channel. You press the like button. And finally, what I would ask you to do is get the URL to this YouTube channel, this particular PEP show that you're watching tonight, and share it on Facebook, LinkedIn, because if you found it useful, by Joe, I reckon that someone else in your network will also find it useful. So please do share that across the board. I'm going to go to a next question, which is very interesting. I like this kind of question. It's going to involve myself, Simon Hodgson, and Tim in this one, because it's Ian is asking a question about we've got a plot of land, which he's got a house, but he can build another house on it, in which he can then rent or sell, but he's thinking about selling it. Now, from a tax perspective, as well as a risk perspective, anyone that comes to me and says, well, what should I do? My general answer, I don't like giving general answers, but this one really does fit the bill. If you've got a plot of land and you're looking to build, there's risk. And therefore, you need to capture risk inside of a limited company, because if something goes wrong and it's in your own personal name, the person that is injured or dies on your site could sue you personally, which means all of your personal assets will go with it. If that happens inside of a limited company, then the liability remains with that limited company and not on you. So that's the first thing. From a tax perspective, moving to a limited company could also be very tax advantageous, because if you do it in your personal name, it could be argued from HMRC, and they have argued this with a couple of, not just my clients, but generally speaking, whereby someone is considered to be a trade, even on their first flip, and charged income tax, not capital gains tax, and they have national insurance charges as well. So you could be looking at 47% tax if you're not careful, which is a lot of money to give to HMRC. So from a risk and tax perspective, always inside of a limited company. But Tim, Simon, let's start with you, Tim. What's your thoughts? Plot of land, already a house on it, looking to build another house and then sell it. Any legal aspects to you?
Well, firstly, I think you're entirely right on risk. There is always a risk with development. And then in a limited company, obviously, you're much safer. But in terms of how you do it, it's very simple. This is a genuine title split. A lot of people in the property community use the phrase title split, but actually my lawyers, one of them is a bit pedantic and he gets a bit irritated because actually often they're not title splits. So if you buy a building, for example, and convert it into 4 flats, People call it title splitting. You're not title splitting. What you actually do, you have a freehold and you're creating 4 leases. So it's not title splitting. This, however, is title splitting. So from what I understand, you've got a plot of land and you're simply dividing it into building a house on A, building a house on B. That's a title split. Relatively straightforward. The issues, I think, really would be mainly tax in terms of when you would want to do it, whether you'd want to do it presumably before or afterwards, how you'd sell it. But yeah, that'd be a simple title split. So you end up with start with one title, divide it, you've got 2 completely separate freehold titles.
Simon Hodgson.
Yeah, it's certainly easy to raise funds against that build if you've created a separate title that the plot sits on. It's not impossible to do it on the one title, but it's definitely an awful lot easier. And I think were we making an assumption then that that person's going to continue living as a main residence in?
I think they say yeah.
Then it's very key because you need to kind of separate main residence against investment and have the 2 done down the middle.
Very true. Mr. Hilliard, you're coming in like a stealth bomber.
Yeah, don't forget, always check with your mortgage lender that they're happy for you to do the development, because the property will be at risk whilst you're developing, because it will affect the value of your property that you're living in. So make sure you got permission.
Ross.
It's gone on mute. Like it.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Gas, water, electric, utilities. Don't forget drainage. Just check it before you think about it, because if your drainage doesn't run the right way, the project's over, cost-wise.
Wow. Oh, do you know, I would never have thought about that. But that is the experience of this panel, isn't it? How brilliant is it? So Paul has asked the question, with limited company mortgage, is there ever a point you get to with an amount of profit that you do not have to pay to get a solicitor to witness and advise on a personal guarantee? Simon?
No, is the short answer, because that's called independent legal advice. And the whole point of it is that you aren't the borrowing entity, the limited company is, and as a director, you're acting on behalf of the company and you have to have taken ILA. Pretty simple.
Yeah, it's a pain, isn't it? I know, but that's one of the things you have to take as an investor that's doing things in limited companies. Obviously, if you're buying in personal names, you don't have to do it. But yeah, it's one of those things that when I'm living abroad, it can be a bit of a challenge. So because that needs to be done in the room. But I have got some solicitors that are able to do that over Zoom now because they know us well. But yeah, it's just one of those things that you have to do.
Tim, you had your hand up. Tim, you're on mute. Everyone's doing this tonight. What is it, the mute button going on?
I thought I'd unmuted, but clearly I hadn't. Right. Basically, a lot of people complain about rates and why they have to do it. It's not a legal requirement, but it's the requirement of the lenders, as I'm sure Simon Hodgson will confirm. And it's all really to do with the lenders covering their back. What they want to ensure is that anything goes pear-shaped with the mortgage deeds, they know ones are going to get hammered. It's going to be the lawyers. So what they're effectively doing, they're getting a free insurance policy by pinging you over to the lawyers. Now, as far as the lawyers are concerned, I know a lot of people think, oh, it's just rubber stamping. It's not. There's a significant risk for lawyers. Our brokers, our mortgage brokers, don't like us. Sorry, our professional indemnity insurance brokers do not like us doing this kind of work. As a result, we do very little of it because we charge quite a lot because we know the risks. So when you hear people saying, oh, it's only 50 quid I got it done for, or my mate did it for free, that's really risky. What it tells you is those solicitors may be doing you a favour, but they don't understand risk. And use them for that if you know what you're doing. It doesn't matter go to somebody who's not going to explain very much, just rubber stamping it, but don't use them for anything else because they do not understand risk. It is a risky thing, and that's why you have trouble finding a solicitor to do it. And a lot of the biggest and best firms simply refuse to give this advice because it's so expensive. So if you get it done for 50 quid, it's a bargain if you know that what you're going into. But otherwise, that's the reason why it's so expensive. It's not lawyers ripping you off. It's actually the insurance company, the banks rather, the lenders getting you to pay for an insurance policy for them.
Peanuts.
So I'm going to kind of have to stop there because, would you believe, it's 8:30. It's absolutely shocking. And I do apologise, but we are not going to be able to get through all the questions. There have been some great questions. And to be honest, guys, as much as we want to get through all these questions, we could be here for 4 hours and still not get through. But what I want to emphasise the important, and I will say this for the panel members as well, it's actually the way that we approach these questions and we answer them so thoroughly that I think the value is in the quality of the answer, not trying to rush through the questions. So I think if we've got questions, we've not been able to answer them, we apologize, but this is a free show and we are going to give you excellent value. And we would rather answer your question with such love and respect and care, with such detail, that you go away delighted. So, do bear with us. If we didn't get your question, I appreciate that. Come back next month, get it in there, because we will make sure we do it. But I don't want to kind of say to the guys, actually, we're going to do a quick fire round, because I just felt it was disingenuous. I just think it was trying to rush it, and then people weren't getting the real answer that they deserve. I think this has been a great show, but that's just me. So, but Bronwen, over to you to close out. And Tim, if you could find out, because you do such a good job of this, when the next event is as well, that'd be great.
So yeah, thank you everybody. We have had a lot of questions, and because it's the first one of the year, and everybody's just come back on holiday, we got loads right at the last minute. So yeah, we can't answer all of them. So you've got to get that question in early and in advance, and we will do our best. But yeah, what an amazing event. We've covered so many different topics, but the main theme of it all is work with experts and work with people that are also investors. And that's us today. Going forward, this year, we're really going to focus on the quality of this group, because we may well start to come to you with, what are the topics that you might want us to have some special events on, because the same topics come up again and again. So it could be, if you give us some feedback, that you might want one with a pensions expert, for example, because we're not qualified. I'm more than happy to bring my pensions expert in to have a special session. So my homework for all of you listening today is to come back to me with some ideas of things that you think you would like to hear about this year. And we'll do our best to come up with an expert that could perhaps have a special session on, and it might be outside the usual monthly one as well. So yeah, this year is going to be, more and more value for all of you for free. And as you can tell, we all have a lot of fun doing it. So whatever, experience you've had in property so far, the name of the game is education. Learning and working with experts. So thank you to all my experts on the panel. We're looking forward to having a fantastic 2022, and we will see you in February. Tim will be the 7th of February, I think. Is that right? Oh, you're on mute.
Tim, the mute button's got you again.
Mute.
I could have sworn I pressed that. Clearly, I'm useless with technology. I'm taking after Paul.Hilliard, us old chaps, Yes, it is Monday, February 7th. We're back as usual to the first Monday of every month. Same place, same time, same channel. Monday the 7th at 7. See you then.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.